which was Lolo. Now, many people probably before me have already lauded all of the different ways that he has touched their lives personally, all the incredible things he's done militarily, politically, economically. Ultimately, the biggest thing that I can truly say from my heart to my grandfather is just a very, very simple thank you. And that is a very, very loaded thank you. It is a thank you that has so many different layers of meaning in my life. From huge life-altering gestures such as letting me pursue studies in a field that I could only dream of, in a place that I could only dream of, to how important having a very firm handshake is. My Lolo had his own language. He had his own way of expressing himself. Being an army man, of course, these ways were a little bit more covert. When you knew what to look for, there were some genuine moments that made a huge impact to me growing up. I would like to share two moments in particular that, to this day, still impact me the most. When I was still in high school, I had to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning every single day just to make sure that I got to my school before rush hour traffic hit. And most of those days, my Lolo would be seated at the table getting ready to start his day. During these 5 a.m. half-awake Sergio moments, I would engage in some small talk with my Lolo as he was reading his newspapers and circling any pertinent information and writing it down for his team or for some new sermon or some new speech. Or even if it's just something that he wanted to learn. My Lolo always wanted to learn. He always wanted to relate to whatever the crowd was, even if it were people like me, my generation. And it was always heartwarming to see either him go to work or to be able to share a little bit of 3-in-1 coffee with him and say, "Right, Lolo, have a good morning. I'll see you later." And then I would see him later that night coming back from the office during dinners. There was one day in particular where I was already in college. And I went to college in the United States. This was a day in particular where my flight was early. It was around that golden 5:30 o'clock in the morning hour where my Lolo would usually get up to his usual morning routine before heading to the office. Knowing that I wouldn't see him for another, potentially year as I pursued my studies, he cleared off the chair next to him and he said, "Hey guy, sit here." And while we didn't talk very much, that tiny, tiny gesture was something that told me so much more than he would even say outright. It showed me that he would miss me, that he loved me, and he didn't want to see me go so soon, but he wanted to spend a little bit of extra time with me, even in close proximity before I had to leave. Me being the youngest grandchild, naturally, I was one of the last to graduate from my primary set of studies. And my graduation ceremony was one of, if not the last time that my Lolo was able to visit the US. It meant the world to me that in 2017, they would travel halfway across the world just to see their youngest grandchild graduate, brave through all of Boston, which is full of colleges, all graduating at the same time. So you can imagine how chaotic Boston was. But they did it. There was no complaints. They were just very, very excited. After the graduation ceremony, we went to have lunch. But during that lunch, I sat next to my Lolo. For some reason, I was so nervous to look him in the eye and say thank you. It took embarrassingly longer in my head than I thought it would. But after telling him, "I greatly appreciate you coming all this way just to see me graduate," the moment that I will take with me forever was him just putting his hand on my shoulder, looking me, smiling, and said, "You've earned it, guy." And in my Lolo's eyes, I could see just how proud he was. He wasn't the president. He wasn't the tiger of Asia. He was my Lolo, looking at me with the pride of a Lolo in his eyes. And just like in that moment, it has taken me an embarrassingly long time to muster up the courage to even record this message, to ultimately just say thank you, to say thank you for giving me the legendary Ramos hard-headedness, for showing me the importance of a good, firm handshake upon meeting somebody, for showing me how you can perform in front of a crowd. Because my lolo, everyone saw him as charismatic, everyone saw him as super warm and friendly, and he was a performer, and that's something that I don't think many people get to realize. Thank you for giving me a roof over my head and taking care of me almost as another parent for more than 10 years. Thank you for giving me opportunity so that I can have a life that I can say that I am proud of. And thank you for being a lolo that I can say that I am proud of. And ultimately, thank you for giving me a name that I could say that I am proud of. Ramos. That is a name with so much history, so much passion and hard work already baked into it. And it wouldn't have been that way if it wasn't for you. And thank you for being my lolo. To the Philippines, you were the 12th and the best president. To the world, you were the tiger of Asia. But to me, you're my lolo. And that's something that I say with so much pride and so much love in my heart. So thank you, Lolo. And thank you for also telling us, no matter what happens, kaya natin to. I love you, Lolo.
One of our country's top operatic sopranos happened to come home from Berlin for a short visit just at this time, and she would like to pay tribute to President Fidel Ramos by singing two of his favorite songs. Please welcome Andion Fernandez.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For my first song, I would like to sing Maalaala Mo Kaya by Constancio de Guzman, arranged for string quartet by my husband, Jeffrey Ching. And the second would be Minamahal Kita by Mike Velarde.
Huwag mong sabihin ika'y hamak kahit na isang mahirap, pagkat ang tangi kong pag-ibig kanya nang hinahanap. Aanhin ko ang kayamanan kung ang puso'y salawan. Nais ko'y pag-ibig na tunay at walang kamatayan. pagsintay di maiba. Hindi mo ba nadarama, sinta? Bawat kilos ko'y nangarap ka. Minamahal, minamahal kita. At nasa sa'yo ang tanging pag-asa. Asan ang kung aking wari sinta ay naghihintay, pagtapatan ka. Kung nais malaman, sinta, bakit tangi kang minamahal? Ika'y mahal, minamahal kita. Pagsintay di mag-iba. Hindi mo ba nadarama, sinta? Bawat kilos ko'y nangarap ka. Minamahal, minamahal kita. At nasa sa'yo ang tanging pag-asa. Asan
Thank you, Andion Fernandez. I would like to read a message from the Management Association of the Philippines. The Management Association of the Philippines condoles with the Ramos family and joins the country in mourning the passing of His Excellency former President Fidel V. Ramos. His administration was distinguished by impressive reforms on energy, economic liberalization, infrastructure and social reform, among others, which fueled an engine for national progress built on his twin themes of people empowerment and global competitiveness. FVR was an epitome of management excellence for nation building. His good governance program is unparalleled. He has undoubtedly served the country with the highest standards of professionalism, integrity, and transparency. His unifying leadership and passion for CSW, completed staff work, has become and should continue to be the benchmark for national and local governance. FVR will forever be remembered for his genuine love of country, overwhelming dedication to public service, and excellent stewardship of the Philippine economy in the midst of formidable challenges. We indeed lost a great Filipino leader, statesman, peacemaker, and stabilizer. Signed, Rogelio L. Singson, MAP President. And now we would like to call on Mr. Renato Valencia former chairman of the SSS, to give his tribute.
Our thoughts and prayers go with Mrs. Ming Ramos and the rest of the family for the passing of our beloved President Ramos. Not many know this, but I have been privileged to have had President Ramos as my mentor for 58 years. We also have been good neighbors in Ayala, Alabang for over 40 years. And as most everybody knows, he loved to jog early in the morning daily. And when he was in Ayala, Alabang, he would do just that. We happened to have a common street called Maria Cristina. He would stop by my house, ring the doorbell, and the whole household goes into mayhem until I'm able to join him. Later on, as he advanced in years, he shifted from jogging to brisk walking, which was more to my liking. I entitled my brief tribute to President Ramos in the words that came from him, which I quote, "I took care of Rene." In FBR's birthday celebration a couple of years back, my wife Lenny told me FBR whispered to her, "I took care of Rene." Indeed, FBR took care of me as he did of all who had the privilege of serving under him. He took care of me while I was in the military, and he watched over me as SSS president under his administration. Back to 1964, or 58 years ago rather, I was a young lieutenant, a fresh graduate from the Philippine Military Academy, when I first glimpsed FBR's imposing figure as he observed our basic airborne class at Fort Magsaysay with the first Special Forces Group, which he founded and organized after his Special Forces training at Fort Bragg, USA. Then, after completing our Special Forces training, Mitch Templo, Phil Pante, Ting Tigas, and I were fortunate to join 10th BCT Airborne, which formed part of the first Special Forces Group under FDR. Being in the military was risky, but joining the elite Special Forces Group was hazardous. But truth to tell, we enjoyed every moment of it. Jumping from a plane at 2,000 feet with a parachute and falling at 19 feet per second was very scary at first, but one gets used to it after a few jumps. FVR loved to jump with us, but even more, he enjoyed skydiving from 14,000 feet or higher. He must have had the most number of jumps, for he managed to jump every time an aircraft became available, be it a C-47, a C-130, Piper Cub, helicopter, or whatever. Special Forces operations were essentially guerrilla operations, living off the land and the enemy. It involved penetrating enemy territory by parachute jumping or rappelling from high cliffs or helicopter, or crossing rivers in full battle gear, then surviving and fighting to win, among other dangerous missions. FBR was always with his troops, wherever and whenever, to inspire us, guide us, and lead us, especially when the mission was critical, including recovering comrades lost in combat or training. In 1966 to 1968, I had the privilege of serving under FBR with the first Philippine Civic Action Group in Tay Ninh, Vietnam. As a security company executive officer, our mission was to protect against the Viet Cong guerrillas, our doctors and nurses as they went treating patients in villages, and mostly to secure our Corps of Engineers as they cleared forests, built roads, bridges, schoolhouses, and other facilities. As our commander, FBR kept casualty to a minimum. Despite the fact that we were non-combatants, we, like the Allied combat troops, were exposed to the same mortar or rocket attacks, ambushes, booby traps, sniper shots, and other enemy action anytime, anywhere. Finally, as SSS President for 8 years, 2 years under President Cory Aquino, and 6 years under President Eddie Ramos, I was bestowed full trust and confidence by the leadership, which enabled SSS to fully computerize and decentralize its operations, double its active membership from 10 to 20 million, and more than triple its resources from 50 billion pesos to 170 billion pesos. FVR, thank you, sir, for being an inspiration and a role model to all of us.
I would now like to call the de Ayala brothers. First, Jaime Augusto Zobel de Ayala, Chairman, and Fernando Zobel de Ayala, President and CEO of Ayala Corporation.
On behalf of our family and the Ayala Group, our deepest condolences to Mrs. Ming Ramos and the Ramos family. Our country has lost one of its most steadfast pillars, but we take comfort that President Ramos's monumental legacy will continue to live on, not only in the physical things that were built under his watch, but also within every Filipino whose life was made much richer by everything that he made possible. He will always be remembered with much love and respect as one of the nation's great leaders. President Ramos's courage, conviction, and leadership ushered the Philippines into an era of stability and transformation built upon solid foundations. With him was a stellar team: Joey Quisia at the Bangko Central, Ramon del Rosario, Bobby De Ocampo, Romy Bernardo at the Department of Finance, Franklin Drilon at the Department of Justice, Ambassador June Painor at the Office of the Presidency, Paul Dominguez in Mindanao, Rafi Alunan, Rene Valencia at the SSS, among many, many others, who became close partners and friends of the Ayala Group and our family after or in between their respective stints in government. Our people enjoy much better lives today through services that can now be easily accessed. Among his foremost contributions was reinforcing a policy framework that allowed private institutions to participate more actively and meaningfully in national development. The Build, Operate, Transfer law became the blueprint, not just for the Philippines, but also for other countries that learned from our pioneering example on how public-private projects can be impactfully and properly done. This institutionalized multi-sector collaboration as a pathway to solve the country's challenges and build a solid platform for a progressive Philippines, a principle that we now embrace today. As an example, many of us remember the debilitating power crisis of the 90s. President Ramos and then Energy Secretary Del Lazaro engaged the private sector to address this issue in less than 3 years, which allowed many other industries to flourish. A beneficiary was telecommunications, where President Ramos facilitated new investments and a more dynamic and competitive playing field. Globe Telecom was born out of this period. Today, Globe touches the lives of more than 60 million Filipinos, fostering meaningful connections while allowing new possibilities through digital technologies. These would not have been possible without President Ramos's vision and tenacity and the valuable support given by Del Lázaro at the time. It was a great honor to have known and worked with President Ramos both as a public servant and in his years as a private citizen. We will continue to remember him as a man who led by example, demanded and expected excellence from all, and who lived life in selfless service to the nation.
President Ramos established solid foundations for the country's future. I would also like to honor him for his remarkable foresight, integrity, and resolute will to improve the lives of all Filipinos. In 1995, President Ramos saw a looming water crisis due to leakages, a growing population, and decades of underinvestment. Together with his cabinet, Congress, and then NEDA Director General C.L. Habito, he enabled the private sector to offer its expertise to improve water services. The Ayala Group, through Manila Water Company, won the bid to manage the East Zone concession. President Ramos was instrumental in the birth of Manila Water, which subsequently gained tremendous support from Presidents Arroyo and Noynoy Aquino, as it expanded to reach more Filipinos. We will always be grateful for the trust and opportunity that these administrations made possible. Since 1997, Manila Water laid down and rehabilitated 5,700 kilometers of water lines. Water losses were reduced to a world-class 12 to 14%. When we received the company, it was losing 63% of the water. Back then, only 26% of the population had 24/7 water supply. Now it is at 100% in eastern Metro Manila and now expanding into Rizal. From just a single sewage treatment plant, there are now 41 facilities. Significantly, the price of water per cubic meter is now more affordable than in Singapore, Tokyo, and Beijing. All of this was at zero cost to the government. We thank President Ramos for planting the seeds for all these milestones. Through these achievements that he made possible, Manila Water became a prime global example, documented and taught by many institutions, including Harvard Business School and the Asia Development Bank, on how water privatization can be properly done. President Ramos so deeply loved our nation that he did whatever was necessary to give the Filipino a better life, guided by the principles of fairness and integrity. This was his gift to all of us. We will miss his presence, guidance, and tenacity. We hope to build on this gift and create, together as one Filipino people, a just, progressive, and equitable nation that we all deserve. In FER's words, kaya natin ito. May God bless the Ramos family and our former president, truly one of the greatest Filipinos to have lived. May he rest in eternal peace.
I would like now to read another message, this time from Peter Wallace. President Ramos was a revolutionary. President Ramos was a hero. He put adherence to the nation's constitution and support of the people over loyalty to his boss. He risked his life in a daring coup that risked failure but instead succeeded when the people massed in support. Cory Aquino had won the snap election and Ramos defended it. Later, perhaps in gratitude, Cory anointed Ramos to replace her. The populace agreed. He became the second post-Marcos leader. He immediately sat down to work, complete staff work, in red pen and frequent meetings with Congress, 83 in all, coupled with a worthy ethic that wore everyone else out, resulted in a complete overhaul of the country's political, social, and economic condition. He opened up the economy and instituted reforms to provide a fairer, more attractive condition in which business could flourish. He traveled extensively to convince foreign businessmen that this was the place to invest, and they did. What stood out was how, though, through emergency powers, he brought 24-hour power back to a country suffering daily brownouts. A stagnant economy rose to a 6% growth. Peace agreements were reached with the Muslims and the communists, and he gave a nation confidence in itself. The changes he wrought created the foundation upon which future presidents could build. They were visionary in how he saw the Philippines should be, a vision that is a reality today in ever so many ways. President Fidel Ramos was a statesman, a leader who transformed the Philippines into a strong, open, fair society. I had the good fortune to work with the president as an advisor. He became a dear friend I will miss. He will be sorely missed by us all. We salute him in his passing. Signed, Peter Wallace. And at this point, friends of First Lady Ming Ramos, known as the executives, would like to pay tribute to FVR with some of his favorite songs.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Francis Manglapus, and we are with the Executives Band. This is the band that was started by my late father, Raul Manglapus, in the 1950s, close to 60 years ago. Not only was my father and President Ramos political allies, they also shared a deep love for music. The band started as an after-hours band with amateur musicians, all with mediocre musical talent. But for some reason, they were they got a lot of invitations in the 60s. They were able to jam with Duke Ellington, Lionel Hampton, and so forth and so on. But during the martial law, of course, we hibernated for a while. But we came back with a vengeance after the EDSA Revolution. And then when President Ramos won, my dad had a great idea. Because we were not getting many invitations those days because iba yung music namin mga 40s, 1840s, that's how long ago. No, actually, pre-war, war, so he had a great idea. After hearing Christy, your mother, play the piano in one of the state visits in Malaysia, my dad said, why don't we recruit Ming Ramos as our pianist? So that's what happened. And the rest is history. We became a regular fixture in Malacanang. We were invited to entertain, and not only entertain, but we raised a lot of money for the pet projects of Mrs. Ramos and President Ramos. So that's a little background on the band. President Ramos, had many talents, but I think the musical talent was to the First Lady. Because for President Ramos, medyo kulang. I remember one event where our piano player at the time was Bert De Rosario, who was the founder of Trebel, great pianist, was invited to go to Malacanang to prepare FDR's song because FDR wanted to sing in the state visit of Mahathir. Because he heard Mahathir was also going to sing, so kailangan handa siya. So, sure enough, upon instructions, our piano player went to Malacanang, practiced with FBR for about 4 or 5 hours. I don't know how long, but it was quite long. And then during the state dinner, we were about to play the song. It was an easy song, Sin to Tell a Lie, one of his favorite songs. So we were ready to play. Our piano player just looked at it and said, wag na kayo sumali. I said, bakit? Madali lang naman yan eh. Hindi. Kasi pag kumakanta na si FBR, mga 5 key changes all at the same time. Hindi nyo mahahabol to. But, that's the way FBR, all in good fun. Anyway, got so at home with us that he even recommended, and we probably should have done it. He said, you know, from now on, I think I should call you the Chief Executives Band. Anyway, we'd like to play our signature song. It's actually a funeral song, but it's a happy funeral song. It's the product of the synchronization of Roman Catholicism mixed in with the jazz rhythms from Africa, all molded together in that great city of New Orleans. Saints Go Marching In. Marie Puyat, funeral song. Business niya, funeral parlor, kaya tamang-tama eh. Okay. No, ikaw na.
Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. I would like to be in that number when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the sun refused to shine. Oh, when the sun refused to shine. I would like to be in that number when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the trumpet sounds its call. Oh, when the trumpet sounds its call. I would like to be in that number when the saints go marching in.
Next up will be performing a love song from the early 30s. Just to give that pre-war.
Something that Ming would probably sing to Tito Eddie.
Yes.
Hey.
Someday you'll come along, the man I love, and he'll be big and strong, the man I love. And when he comes my way, I'll do my best to make him stay. He'll look at me and smile, I'll understand, and in a little while he'll take my hand. And though it seems absurd, I know we both won't say a word. Maybe I shall meet him Sunday, maybe Monday, maybe not. Still, I'm sure to meet him one day. Maybe Tuesday will be my good news day. He'll build a a little home just meant for two, from which I'll never roam. Who would you? And so all else above, I'm waiting for the man I love. Maybe I shall meet him Sunday, maybe Monday, maybe not. Still, I'm sure to meet him someday. Maybe Tuesday will be my good news day. He'll build a little home just meant for two, from which I'll never roam. Who would you? And so all else above, I'm waiting for the man
Thank you, Marie, and for our final number, for our unforgettable president, the best we ever had, Nat King Cole. Unforgettable, that's what you are.
unforgettable, though near or far.
Like a song of love that clings to me, how the thought of you does things to me. Never before has someone been more unforgettable in every way.
In every way.
And forevermore, that's how you'll stay.
That's how you'll stay.
That's why, darling, it's incredible that someone so unforgettable thinks that I am unforgettable too.
Ako ulit. I just have one line. someone been more.
Unforgettable
Unforgettable
in every way.
in every way.
And forevermore. That's how you'll stay.
That's how you'll stay.
That's why, darling, it's incredible that someone so unforgettable
Thinks that I am unforgettable too.
Thank you.
Thank you, President
Unforgettable
FDR.
President FDR, the best.
Thank you, Francis, and the famous Executives Band. Before we continue with the tribute, I'd like to read a statement of co-chair John D. Negroponte of the U.S.-Philippine Society from Washington, D.C. Fidel V. Ramos was a true soldier statesman, a graduate of the United States Military Academy. He fought alongside American forces in both Korea and Vietnam. He was an immense credit to the military profession, and in the wake of profound political changes in his country, in 1986, he served as Defense Secretary in the cabinet of President Cory Aquino, and then became president himself during the years 1992 to 1998, a period of economic prosperity and relative political calm for the Philippines. I was privileged to serve as United States Ambassador to the Philippines from 1993 to 1996, and had the honor to work very closely with President Ramos and his team during that time, including for a visit by President Bill Clinton and Mrs. Hillary Clinton to Manila in November 1994. In these and other meetings, President Ramos helped lay the basis for a fruitful and constructive relationship between our two countries in the post-basis period. Fidel Ramos will be well remembered in our country. Signed, John D. Negroponte, co-chair, U.S.-Philippine Society. And we continue now with the tributes. This time from a member of Team Philippines, we'd like to call Annie Tan Yi.
I became an instant fan of the president after I shook his hand at one of the business conferences at EDSA Plaza Hotel. 4 hours later, I still refused to wash my hands. It was 10 o'clock in the evening. I was like, shall I go to bed without washing my hands and just wash it tomorrow? Buti na lang wala pa akong COVID noon. Then came his working visit to Vietnam. My name luckily landed on the short list of the official delegation accompanying the president, together with 15 very prominent businessmen. we were called to Malacanang for a short briefing. And then when I was walking up the stairs, I saw the president standing and ready to shake my hands. And I was like, oh my God, again. We left Manila for Vietnam at around 2 o'clock in the morning and arrived in Hanoi while their government offices were still closed. When someone from their Department of Trade opened the door, he was still wearing cansorcillo. I guess they were not expecting that we would arrive at very early in the morning. We were ushered into a small meeting room where we waited for 2 hours. Then at exactly 8 a.m., 2 guys appeared. Yung nakakansorsilyo, nakabihis na siya. And then another guy, whom I suppose would be the equivalent of their Minister of Trade. During the meeting, there were only like 2 of us who were talking and meeting. And there was the guy who was wearing cansorcillo earlier was the interpreter and taking down notes. And the other 12 business delegate were trying their best to keep themselves awake. So I kept myself busy by making sure none of them start snoring. I was seated beside, I think, Attorney Sigon Reyna, and I used my elbow to nudge him. And then to my right was Attorney Emil Jurado, and he started making those weird sounds. I guess he was snoring. So I pinched his thigh under the table. And I used the power of my eyes and my lips to poke those I couldn't reach. I was like, because they were sleeping. I was like, at that time, Vietnam was not yet as progressive as they are today. There were hundreds of motorcycles on the streets and only very few cars. In fact, during the meeting, we learned that Vietnam was getting that time, $3 billion worth of $3 billion US dollars worth of foreign investments, while we were only getting some 700 million US dollars. We were so envious of Vietnam. That was in 1993, and the start of a different kind of journey in my life. We, the same group of businessmen, traversed the globe with the most hardworking president, supported by competent and professional government officials, such as Secretary Bobby Romulo, Secretary Rizalino Navarro, Secretary General Ermita, Secretary Cesar Bautista, and of course, General Magno was always beside the president. Despite the grueling long haul and jet lags, President Ramos gave us strength and inspiration. When we were trying to catch up on sleep, he would wake us up and tell stories. We would gather around him, not wanting to miss a single word he would say. And it was always a delight listening to his short anecdotes and words of wisdom. I could see that he genuinely enjoyed interacting with the business delegation, with the crew, with the photographers, with the reporters. He exhibited boundless enthusiasm, parang hindi siya napapagod. He was very presidentiable and respectable. Yes, he spoke with candor and humor. His jokes were funny, but some of his jokes were, but not bastos. There was never any moment when he displayed macho power. I have never seen him fall asleep or doze off during official meetings. He told us to learn how to cut naps. I observed how sincere and focused he was in trying to uplift our country's stature by promoting trade and investments. As president, he really carried the Philippine flag with pride and dignity. He truly and verily exemplified what it means to be the president of a country. I felt the difference in the way foreigners perceive Filipinos. Tumaas ulit ang tingin sa atin ng ibang bansa. He was able to earn his counterparts' respect and fondness. He was professional, but he also exuded sincerity and warmth. Aside from Vietnam, we went to Brunei in 1993, London in 1994, Sydney, Melbourne, Auckland in 1995, LA, San Diego, Acapulco, Mexico City, Panama, San Francisco in 1996, and in 1997 we went to Moscow, where I first tasted shawarma. We went to Kuwait, Prague, Vienna in 1997, and in Seattle, New York in 1997 too. In Seattle, the Department of Trade and Industry required us to wear black suits and black leather shoes. Siyempre, we were meeting with no less than Bill Gates. Dapat presentable kami. So, yung mga kasamahan ko, nagpa-shine pa ng sapatos. And then, so, tigas na tigas kami, para kaming men in black. And then came Bill Gates, naka-polo shirt, naka-roll up yung sleeves, naka-maong, and in contrast with our black shoes, his shoes were so white kasi naka-rubber shoes siya. It's like, in 1997, we went to Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa in dead winter. DTI and Malacanang followed the schedule with military precision. Even if our flight was at 9 a.m., they would require us to put our luggage outside our hotel rooms very early, like 12 midnight, 1, 2 o'clock. When we were leaving Montreal for Ottawa, they required us to put our luggage outside the door. They would collect at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Our doors were so heavy and you have to have the key kasi pag sumara, wala, malak ka na, you'll be locked out. So Attorney Sigyon Reyna, he was pushing his luggage using his right foot and he was leaving his left leg, ganon, to make sure the door would not close. Yung maleta would not roll because the carpet was so thick, hindi siya gugulong. So he lifted his left foot, clack, the door locked. And so he walked, he was wearing cansorcillo and sando. So he walked to the elevator, tried to call the housekeeping, but no one was answering at 3 o'clock in the morning. So he had no choice but to take the elevator, hoping walang ibang sasakay. So he was able to do that. And that was not the worst part. One of us wasn't even aware that the door was like that. So he put his luggage, so confident, bumaksak na ganon. So he had to step out and fix his luggage. Eto na, ganon siya, wala siyang susi. And he was only wearing briefs. So it's like, si Attorney Sigurd Reyna, he said when he went to the elevator, nakaganon siya. But this guy, he said he did not know where to position his, kung yung dede niya tatakpan niya or yung bird niya. So he went to the where the elevator is, and again, that same thing happened. At 3 o'clock in the morning, no one was answering the phone. So he had no choice but to take the elevator down to the lobby wearing only briefs. Unfortunately for him, he said biglang bumukas, merong sumakay. And he said he didn't know whether to cover his bird or his face. He said, this was like, oh my God, and he was shaking because it was so cold. Yeah. The last official travel was in New York and in Washington, D.C. General Magno, remember, in Washington, D.C. in 1998. And even after the president's term ended in 1999, we went to Tel Aviv in Jerusalem and also to Paris in 2001. President Ramos made us all feel important. The members of Team Philippines didn't mind dropping everything we were doing to accompany him in his sales travels. It felt good being a part of a team that has no personal agenda other than this noble endeavor to help promote our country. He made us feel we were doing something good for our country by just being there. We felt appreciated. During the big gathering of Filipinos in Australia, we couldn't help but shed tears while watching our thousands of kababayans wave mini Philippine flags and chanting his name and singing Bayan Ko. We felt proud to be Filipinos. We were proud to accompany this president who genuinely cared for our country and its people. The Philippines was lucky to have President Ramos as president. He was a true statesman. And his efforts paid off. His vision of a tiger economy was achievable. Even during the Asian financial crisis, we did fairly well. We survived it. We believe in him and had seen how hard he worked. We knew that our country still needed his leadership, but his 6-year term was ending. At some point, I think he wanted to continue what he had started. I'm sure all of you will agree with me that 6 years is too long if you have an incompetent leader. But 6 years is too short a time if you have a great president with a clear vision of where to lead our country to. Towards the end of his term, while in Vienna, the business group founded Team Philippines with a mission to continue promoting trade and investments and to present to the world a good image of the country. Some of the founding members were Attorney Sigon Reyna, Sumalangit Nawa, Attorney Emil Jurado, Ambassador Filimon Cuevas, Sumalangit Nawa din, Ambassador Joe Romero, Sumalangit Nawa, ang dami na pong namatay. Tony Boy Cojuangco, Oscar de Venecia, Andy Soriano, Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr. was with us too, Archit Bartolome, Don Antonio Florendo, Raul Concepcion, Cesar Purisima, Antonio Lopa, Pocholo Jacinto, I think Dayalas also, and yours truly. Nahinayang kami sa nasimulan na ni FBR. A few more years could have catapulted us into his vision of a tiger economy. We all felt sad when FBR's term was ending. There was a clamor to have him as president again. I just wish you did not cremate him so he could still rise from the dead and be our president again. Dear President Fidel V. Ramos, you are our favorite president and you will forever be. It was a great honor and blessing knowing you. Salamat ho sa mga libro, sa mga newspaper clippings, sa mga red ink notes. We hold you in our hearts with the highest regard and respect. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Annie Tanyi. I would now like to call Mr. Paul Dominguez, former presidential advisor for Mindanao.
Thank you. So much has been said over the last few days about FBR's dedication, discipline, his work ethic. I had the distinct privilege of working directly with him for 6 years. And tonight I will speak of FBR's purposefulness and skills as a leader. And I will narrate a few incidents, a few direct experiences I had with him that clearly demonstrated this extraordinary level of not just dedication, but skills. I didn't have a long personal history with FDR. I believe I met him very casually before when he was PCINP chief. During EDSA, I conveyed a few messages back and forth from friends who were in EDSA and I was in Davao. It was my brother Sonny who was his colleague during the administration of President Cory and who also lived very close to him in Alabang. After EDSA, I had 2 or 3 meetings with him because I was asked to do some back-channeling work with the MILF leadership that was quite upset with the early days of the Cory administration. And I remember reporting to the officials in Malacanang, primarily him, on the conversations we had, which were trying to stabilize the situation with the MILF. I helped out a little bit in the presidential campaign and in the vote count. And right after the elections, we had a dinner in my brother's house in Alabang in which we invited some Mindanao officials. That was the total sum of my interactions with the president. Shortly after June 30, I think it was the 3rd or 4th of July, I was traveling of all places in Sarawak. And as I returned to my hotel, I had this frantic message from my wife, "Your name is in the front pages, please call." I had been appointed without my knowledge to be the President's assistant for Mindanao. The first person I called was my brother Sonny, and I said, "Do you know anything about it?" He said, "Yes, I do. I already accepted for you." So, and he said, "Eddie is looking for you. Where are you?" I said, "I'm in Sarawak. I'll be back, I think, 6th or 7th of July. So I reported immediately to him. I had this first extraordinary meeting. He said, "Well, I want you to be my personal representative in Mindanao. You need to become a government official because I will vest you with authority over all national government officials in Mindanao with the exception of elected officials." And he asked me, "How do you think Mindanao should move forward?" I gave him a few ideas in terms of what better infrastructure we needed, the importance of peace and development because that was the main limiting factor to Mindanao's development, and the need for refreshing Mindanao's identity. He said, "Those are all good ideas, etc. Go to work. I will go to Davao on the 15th of July and swear you in." And then I asked him, "Sir, what are your marching orders?" He looked at me straight in the eye and he said, "Paul, we will remain in a campaign mode for the next 6 months." I said, "Sir, the elections are over." He says, "Yeah, I know, but we will continue the campaign for the next 6 months." So we went to work, and not only in Mindanao, but all over the country, organized endless consultations involving thousands of people in gyms. And I remember a number of you were there with the entire cabinet in attendance, listening to petitions, acting on what could be acted upon, giving instructions. These sessions were 2-3 hours long, 4 hours long. A lot of it involved listening, and I handled about 6 or 8 visits to Mindanao in the first 6 months. The president was every weekend out in the field, continuing the campaign. And remember, this was a period of time when we had no emails, no cell phones, no social media. Everything was created, everything was done with body language and messaging, and personal messaging. After 6 months, I believe in early January or February, we received a briefing by SWS, and I'll never forget that. We were in the cabinet meeting, Joe Mag was there, Rafi was there, I believe Bobby De Ocampo was there. And Pepe Miranda, who was giving the briefing, said in his most serious tone, "Mr. President, we'd like to report to you that over 50% of those we surveyed said they voted for you. Remember, FVR only attained 23.6% of the vote. After 6 months, the public said that over 50%, I think close to 60%, said they voted for him. And Mr. Miranda looked at him direct and said, "Mr. President, I have never seen this happen before, but you have modified the collective memory of this country." And he sat back with a big smile and he said, "Gentlemen, the first strategic objective is achieved. Now we pursue the reform agenda at full force." And that's when Joel Monte and Tony Carpio started writing all of those memos, opening up the economy that the Ayalas mentioned earlier today. But the first mandate, the strategic objective in the first 6 months was strengthen the mandate. And we brought this up to over 50% and higher until the unfortunate floor contemplation incident in the mid-95. The second incident that I will recall and relate to you, which again just shows not just the skill but the audacity of the president, was when I went on the first state visit to Malaysia in 1993 in January. Now, for those of you who will recall, and Ambassador Dele Albert is here, our relationships with Malaysia in 1993 were not good. No Philippine president had made a state visit to Malaysia in 30 years, between 1963 and 1993, as a result of the strain due to the Sabah issue. So I was asked to join the meeting because we had an initiative to normalize the border relations. Most of the cabinet was there. They were all preparing for the bilateral meetings. Very tentative because we didn't know what the relationship was. FBR, I believe like 20 minutes before the meeting started, asked for a four eyes meeting with Mahathir. Four eyes meaning just the two of them. And everybody else sat on the outside, no conversation, we were just having coffee. And that four eyes meeting lasted 2 hours. So after which there was no more time for any bilaterals, and he came back to Carcosa, which was the guest house, and he had all of the notes written on the back of his onion skin schedule. Those of you who worked with him, he had this thick bud of onion skin, and he said, "Okay, this is what happened, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is all your instructions. We had a very good meeting, there will be no more bilateral meetings. Our agenda is finished with President Mahathir. He has agreed to look into the possibility of normalizing the border relations with a special growth area." So we were all shocked. And then I asked him, "Sir, what are your marching orders?" He says, "Okay, keep the interest of Malaysia high, make sure it works out, and immediately travel to Indonesia and Brunei and persuade them to join. And when you go to Indonesia, ask Joe Magno to go with you." because Joe had gone to school in the advanced college, General Staff College in Indonesia, knew a lot of people. We visited Governor Rantung, visited his old friends, and that visit was very important because immediately they agreed to go along because the relationship with Indonesia and Malaysia at that time, even then, were not that good. But, you know, next to FDR, Joe was my most important mentor. But that's how it happened. But it all started with an audacious move to engage Mahathir directly, 4 eyes, just the two of them. No note takers on anything. And that completely reset the relationships with the Malaysians to the point that they became our principal support group for the conversations and the eventual negotiations with the MILF 15, 20 years later. But that was this required great audacity and personal diplomacy. The next incident that I would relate, the next two incidents involved security, and the next incident was the raid in Ipil in April of 1995. I don't know how many of you remember that, but several hundred young men from Basilan moved in boats and attacked the town of Ipil in early morning, killed over 50 people, burned the market, attacked all the banks, took hostages, and devastated the largest city in the middle part of Zamboanga. It's a terrible, terrible incident. I was there the day after with a small team to try to stabilize the situation. President Ramos arrived about 2 days later and immediately talked to the local people to ensure that this conflict would not escalate. And then, as he was leaving, he asked me to join him to go back to Zamboanga, which is quite unusual because I would normally always stay behind to carry out what he wanted done. He said, no, you come with me. And when we got into the helicopter, you know, I never sat in the front row next to the pilots. I was always in the back. He says, no, you come here and sit next to me. I have something to tell you. And in the short flight between Ipil and Zamboanga City, which took about 25 minutes, he turned to me and he said, go and organize peace and development summits in every major city in the next 6 months. He said the objective of this Ipil raid was to destroy our peace initiatives with the MNLF. We will not allow that. Go and organize these peace and development summits in every major city in Mindanao, bringing together the leadership of the Mindanao community and invite the MNF leaders to participate. So we went out and did this over the next 6 months, and FDR did not only attend them, he normally gave the opening remarks, stayed the entire conference, sat in on a number of the workshops, received the outputs of every single conference in 6 months. And in so doing, not only wiped out the impact of the Ipil raid, but piece by piece built up the support and advocacy for peace and development in Mindanao in spite of that terrible effort to derail it. So you could see that as soon as he arrived, he saw exactly what the message of that Ipil raid was. And he immediately undertook a strategy to confront it, and not only confront it, but to build the advocacy for peace and development, and personally invested his time there. And when people saw that, and remember, this was 95, this was already the third year of his presidency, and when the community saw that personal investment that he was making in peace and development, it worked. And again, that required not just dedication and discipline, it required a high level of skill that I don't think we have seen in any president since then. The last incident I will relate is something, again, that I will never forget. Sometime in 1996, I believe. After a cabinet meeting, the aide called me and said, the president wants to see you. And walked into his small study, and Secretary De Villa was there. And he said, gentlemen, I have agreed for the military to conduct a police action in this specific barangay in Pikit, Pagalungan border in North Cotabato, Maguindanao. This barangay is the birthplace of Hashim Salamat, of the MILF. We understand that there are bandits, rogue, that are using the place as a hostage, as an area for hostages. So the military wants to undertake a police action. Then he turned to me and he said, okay, I have given the military 3 days to undertake this operation. After 3 days, Paul, you go there with your team to restore and repair everything that is damaged by this operation. This conversation was taking place 5 days before the operation. He knew what was going to happen. He anticipated the consequences. He wanted the consequences managed. And so, operation went there. 3 days later, I arrived with a whole busload of staff and people from DepEd, from DPWH, from all the infrastructure departments who walked in, surveyed everything that the military had disturbed and destroyed. The schoolhouses had holes in the roofs, etc. And we rebuilt everything in 2 months' time, better than what it was started. And that sent a strong message, again, to the community that while we are sensitive to the historical importance of this place, we will not stand for breaking the law, but we are not here to cause permanent injury to anybody. Again, you would never expect, I would never have expected the president to have that kind of assessment and analysis. And that is nothing but, you know, the total putting together of his skill, his purposefulness, his strategic thinking, his dedication, his discipline, his craftsmanship at leadership. And I think that that is something that has not been probably sufficiently discussed. President Ramos presided over a team that had a military cadence to it. Joe is laughing. Every Tuesday morning, you had cluster meetings. Tuesday afternoons, we had a whole afternoons of cabinet meetings. Wednesday after lunch was the press briefing. Weekends, it was the visits to the provinces. 6 years of that in almost a predictable cadence, and the Philippine situation turned around. to sum it all, this was the magnetism of the individual. That so much so that even after his term was done, every time he called, all of us showed up. Rafi, Bobby, Joe, everybody showed up. Not only to honor him, but every time he called, we knew there was something, there was a serious purpose. Whether it was the Boao Forum, whether it was to go and greet the new president of Indonesia. But his commitment to the country, to helping the country, never diminished. And it was a great privilege to have worked with him. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul Dominguez. I'd just like to announce that those who wish to attend the inurnment and the state funeral tomorrow should proceed directly to the libingan ng mga bayani. Please be there before 9:30. Otherwise, you might not be able to get in once the movement starts. So 9:30, you will be met there by the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and they will direct you to the burial site. Oh, by the way, this is being live streamed on the FVR Legacy Facebook page. And for those of you who will not be able to make it to the inurnment tomorrow, you may also view it there, as well as the other TV channels are going to be carrying it live. We now would like to call one of FVR's favorites. Please welcome Delia Albert, former Secretary of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you. I didn't know I was a favorite. Good evening, and let me share with you what I know of FVR as a leader who cared, who dared, and who shared. We are all familiar with FVR's famous battle cry for a caring, daring, and sharing society. I'm a fortunate witness to have seen a leader live a full life according to his values and principles. Firstly, I knew him as Manong Eddie, a name that his mother asked me to call him. Then I knew him as Ninong Eddie when he witnessed my wedding. He deeply cared for his family, his people, and his country. Second, FVR was a man who was likened to the biblical person Joshua, who led the people of Israel to the promised land and dared to effect major changes like he did in our political history. Thirdly, as President Fidel Ramos, who shared all that he could give of himself to the people, the country, and the world. First, FVR cared. He was a caring son to his parents, Narciso Rueca Ramos and Angela Valdez Ramos. When I served as social and appointment secretary to his father, Narciso, from 1967 to 1969, FVR was always ready to offer advice to our team when the secretary wanted to professionalize the foreign service, like the military service. For him, anyone in the public service of the country had to earn their stars through dedicated performance of duty. From him, we learned PRT, perform, reform, and transform, traits which likewise guided me when I became Secretary of Foreign Affairs 37 years later. FVR cared that his father succeeded in his mission as the 9th Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines, both in managing a professional bureaucracy and in the faithful implementation of Philippine foreign policy. He was particularly proud of his father's engagement in ASEAN in his role as one of the 5 founding fathers of the regional organization in 1967. FVR consistently and actively supported the growth and development of ASEAN throughout his career in the military, as president, and later as one of the eminent persons who worked to draft the ASEAN Charter. Uniquely placed, father and son represented 2 generations of leaders committed to the success of ASEAN as the leading regional organization in Asia today. To give the opportunity for Filipinos to learn, understand, and appreciate ASEAN, FVR served as Chair Emeritus of ASEAN Society, a private sector-led initiative whose mission is for Filipinos to understand and appreciate what ASEAN means to their everyday lives. While he was chair, he made sure I did the work. To carry on his mission, the ASEAN Society Philippines will be holding a series of memorial lectures, the Fidel V. Ramos Lecture Series on ASEAN, in partnership with private sector entities, and we invite you to join us in this endeavor. FVR cared deeply for his family. I remember the family lunches he would organize from the 60s so that he could draw his hardworking father away from the office to join his growing family of girls, Angel, Jojo, Chula, Christy, and later Margie. He respected very highly his sister, Leticia Ramos Shahani, that he often referred to her as, quote, better than most others, unquote. He was very proud of her many achievements in promoting the status of women, inspired by their own mother, Angela, or Nana Ilang, whose dedicated efforts as an educator and social worker influenced Letty's life. Letty, as she is popularly known in many circles of the world, is best known and recognized as the initiator of the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which today serves as the Bill of Rights for women all over the world. In her series of articles entitled, quote, Beside Eddie, Mrs. Amelita Ming Ramos wrote not so much about herself, but the life she shared with FVR, writing in her first article that, quote, the longest sentence in the English language is, I do, because there is no divorce in the Philippines. She followed this by confirming that there has never been a single moment of regret that she has been, quote, under detention, end of quote. She cited that of all her marriage vows, the phrase, quote, for better or for worse, unquote, remained more meaningful as she steadily looked after FVR till the end. FVR never failed to honor his father and mother during their birthdays and death anniversaries. For years, I had to share anecdotes about them, especially during the time when NR, or Narciso Ramos, was Secretary of Foreign Affairs, and very notably when he had to retire due to advanced age, only to be replaced by an older man. FVR dared. 4 days in February 1986 gave the Philippines one of its proudest moments in its history as international headlines bannered the bloodless revolution that surprised the world and honored the courage of the Filipino people. In Bonn, Germany at that time, I watched with bated breath as people power unfolded before our eyes and the eyes of the world. Germany was particularly awed by the courageous leadership of FVR that a documentary entitled Die sanfte Revolution, or The Gentle Revolution, was filmed during those tumultuous days. It brought FVR into the homes of European families. To get accurate information on the ground during people power, I made calls to friends like Betty Gobelmonte, who shared with me prayers for FVR and the country as follows. She said, Almighty God, on this critical juncture in our nation's life, we implore you to listen to your children of the Philippines, for you have been a defense for the helpless and the needy, a refuge from the storm. In Australia, where FVR assigned me as what he called the smallest ambassador to the biggest island, in order to negotiate the biggest defense cooperation agreement of the Philippines with any country in the world. In Australia, I met the Czech President, Václav Havel, who was on his way to the Philippines to pay homage to a brave people, the Filipino people. He deeply admired the role of a military man, FVR, who had a bloodless people's revolution, which he personally admitted inspired the Czech people's Velvet Revolution, which ended the rule of the Communist Party in his country, as well as brought the German Berlin Wall down. FVR shared. FVR generously shared his thoughts, his dreams, and his vision and wisdom for a peaceful and prosperous Philippines through volumes of his inspired writings in books, interviews, and even sermons and other means of articulating them. Like many of you, I felt so honored and privileged to receive them regularly with a dedication written with a red felt pen. In March 2018, he emotionally wrote a wonderful article entitled Life Restarts at 90. Tomorrow, FVR embarks on another journey at 94, and with it, a much-deserved rest. In bidding him farewell, we are richly left with a legacy of institutions, a visionary type of governance, tremendous personal discipline and competence. To ensure that we remember him and all the things that he did, he even summed them up in several acronyms. In addition to CSD, caring, sharing, and daring, he is best known to most of us with CSW, as has been mentioned repeatedly, meaning completes tough work, always written in red ink. We're reminded of UST, unity, strength, and teamwork, his advice to government leaders. NLT, not later than, for those who are given special assignments. And of course, the ever PRT, perform, reform, and transform. His advice to Filipino workers, both in the public and private sectors. Thank you, President Fidel Valdez Ramos. You are the best. And LLE, as Mr. Jazas said so earlier, the leader who led by example. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Delia Albert. I'd like to read the resolution of the Philippine Red Cross. Whereas the Philippine Red Cross is an independent, autonomous, non-governmental organization auxiliary to the government in the humanitarian field, providing timely, efficient, and responsive humanitarian services to the most vulnerable in accordance with the principles and values of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent movement. Whereas President Fidel V. Ramos was an invaluable supporter of the PRC in its efforts to deliver humanitarian services to the Filipino people since his term as the President of the Republic of the Philippines from 1992 to 1998 until his untimely demise on the 31st of July 2022. Whereas President Fidel V. Ramos during his term realized the need for a steady supply of blood products throughout the country and signed the National Blood Services Act of 1994, encouraging voluntary blood donation and regulating the operation of blood banks. Whereas President Fidel V. Ramos during his presidency signed Proclamation number 835, declaring 1997 as Red Cross Year in commemoration of the 50th year of the establishment of the PRC, recognizing the organization's efforts in providing search, rescue, relief, and recovery operations in times of calamities and other man-made emergencies. Whereas President Fidel V. Ramos during his administration signed Proclamation number 1021, declaring July of each year as Blood Donors Month to promote the advantages of voluntary blood donation and thus assure adequate supply of volunteer-sourced human blood. Whereas President Fidel V. Ramos had been a strong advocate of blood donation, providing outstanding support to the PRC blood services, and was awarded various blood donor recognition for awards such as the PRC Blood Galloner's Pin and Certificate in 1979 for donating blood 15 times, totaling 4,000 cc of blood, the PRC Bronze Medal and Certificate in 2003 for donating blood 48 times, with the equivalent of 12,960 cc of blood, and the PRC Extraordinary Blood Donor Award in 2012 for donating blood 52 times, with the equivalent of 14,350 cc's of blood. Whereas President Fidel Ramos was conferred the PRC Aurora Aragon Quezon Award during the PRC 72nd anniversary in 2019, and the PRC Gold Humanitarian Service Cross Award in 2021 for his outstanding achievements in public service, his substantial contributions for the betterment of the Filipino people, and his generosity to the PRC. Whereas the Philippine Red Cross profoundly recognizes and honors President Fidel V. Ramos's distinguished service and myriad contributions in supporting the PRC in its endeavors to alleviate the suffering and to uplift the human dignity of the Filipino people. Now therefore it be resolved, as it is hereby resolved, that the Board of Governors, management, staff, and volunteers of the PRC express their deepest and sincerest condolences to the family of the late President Fidel V. Ramos in mourning his passing from this life, done at the Philippine Red Cross National Headquarters, Mandaluyong City, Metro Manila on this 3rd day of August 2022, signed Richard J. Gordon, Chairman and CEO, attested by Corazon Alma G. De Leon, Secretary, Board of Governors. And before the family gives its response and the final tribute by his grandson, we would like to share with you 2 short videos. These videos capture the essence of the life of President Ramos. The first is a montage of the FVR Oral History Project, a living resource with extensive collection of more than 150 interviews with individuals who have had the opportunity of working with and for the President. And the second one reminds us of his famous battle cry. It captures our can-do attitude and the Filipinos' unwavering spirit that brought us front and center in the global community during his presidency.
between us, he has high regard for divine providence. He's a godly person. He may not be a type of person who will preach about it, who will tell you about it. But in my dealing with him, I knew deep in his heart that he has a deep love for God.
I think the public knows naman na Lolo is very makulit. I just want everyone to know that at home, he's even more makulit. Sobrang makulit.
The luxury of family.
He's very near to his people. Kung natutulog kami sa bunker, kasama yung mga tao. Yung mga tao could not believe na si acting chief of staff natutulog sa bunker. Masabi mo talaga, ibang commander siya. Kung ano ang natikman ng tao, kung ano ang experience ng tao, ini-experience din niya.
Pag sinabi niya, starting next week, all our jumps will be equipment jump. Even at night. Equipment jump. He will jump not only with the equipment, meron pa siyang one case of San Miguel beer dito. Para ipakita na jumping with your equipment is not difficult. Basta ipapakita mo na niya, siya muna ang everything that our unit or people in under training went through. Siyempre, pakita mo na niya na he can do it. Setting a very good example.
I had to go back down, look for FVR, and then presented my problem to him. And he said, don't worry about it, your dad is safe. And my father was an opposition leader. So that was my first meeting with the former president. My impression then, he was a no-nonsense person. And when he said that, your father is safe, I knew my father was safe. So there's that, you know there's somebody that you can trust. The next time I meet FVR, he was already gearing to run for the presidency.
I look at his background, military officer, and if he has got personal ambitions, he could dispose somebody and say, I want to rule. But it's not that. I believe that he is a firm upholder of the rule of law.
And what impressed me about him was that he would always be the best prepared among the cabinet members. He would make presentations, very impressive presentations, and it just struck us how well prepared he was. He practiced what he preached about complete staff work.
He lets you put your heads together. Okay. He said that don't come to me if you are a cluster, don't come to me with several recommendations. You submit one recommendation wherein all of you agree to the recommendation. So you're forced to work with them and come up with a solution.
Matters or documents that I sent to him in the morning will be acted in the afternoon. It will be back to me with actions already indicated by the President, approval or disapproval. And papers that I sent to him in the afternoon will come back to me in the morning. No backlog.
He's known for his legendary temper also. I mean, you could get a bawling out if you did the wrong things or said the wrong things or essentially don't do your job well.
That is the legacy. His adherence to the constitutional system of governance.
The one good thing I learned from him also is complete staff work.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think
Tell me
that
about
has served me well in
Okay.
the private sector.
Right.
It's learning about that,
Right.
complete staff work. You don't bring something to him half-cocked, or unfinished.
The introduction of the private sector as a key engine of economic growth, and secondly, the realization of the Philippines as an integral part of what should be a growing and globally significant ASEAN community.
Peace and development. His vision, not only for your country, but for the whole region. He hoped that the whole Asia can enjoy the peace and development.
We were on a state visit, the first to Malaysia. And overnight, We stayed up all night talking about our relations with Malaysia, which was not very good. He called me aside and says, I want to have a four eyes meeting with the Prime Minister. I said, sir, that's not allowed. You gotta have interpreters or note takers. No, you make it happen. I said, okay. So I ran to the ambassador, and the ambassador was in my car. I said, the president wants a four eyes meeting. He says, no, that can't be done. He will never agree. As we went up the stairs with the official party of the president, they directed FBR to one room and the rest of us to another room, which basically means Mahathir agreed. And after 30 minutes or something like that, the president came out and he looked at me and says, ayos na. And after that, in reality, relationship was never better. I think that's an example of a leader knows what the problem is and he responds to it with sometimes feel is unorthodox. When he did it, first of all, I have to commend this effort. It is important that the country and even the world understands what FBR did during his 6 years in office.
Our battle cry for the year 2000 is thumbs up. We can do it. Kaya natin ito, mga Pilipino. Magkaisa tayo, magsama-sama tayo, magtulong-tulong tayo. Ang hamon sa atin eh, kaya ba natin ito? Napakahina sa kondisyo. Sabay-sabay yung pagkarinig dun sa Batanes, Tawi-Tawi, Manila, Ilocos, Cebu, Davao. Kaya ba natin? Ito para marinig doon sa Batanes, sa Tawi-Tawi, sa Pangasinan, sa Quezon at saka sa buong Pilipinas. Isigaw natin. Kaya ba? Kaya. Kaya ba natin ito, mga kababayan? Kaya natin yan. Kaya natin magtagumpay. Don't forget, this is our symbol for Philippines 2000. Ito ang ating bagong simbolo, mga kapatid. Thumbs up. Kaya ba natin ito? Ilakas ninyo para maringig doon sa lawag, hanggang doon sa may Tawi-Tawi. Kaya ba natin ito? Alam nyo, sa atin sa Pilipinas, lagi nating ipinagmamalaki yung ating tinatawag na bibingka. Hindi ho ba? Ano ba itong bibingka ng Pilipino na sinasabi ng ating Pangulo? Yan po ay yung donut na walang butas sa gitna. At yan po ay niluluto sa pamamagitan ng paglalagay ng apoy sa ilalim at apoy sa ibabaw. At yan po ay binabalansin natin, di ba? Balancing. Very well balanced. And one without the other is going to result in a cooking failure. Ngunit kung tayo ay marunong magluto ng bibingka, napakasarap ang resulta. Hindi ba? And that precisely symbolizes our economic growth program. I use 3 words to emphasize this particular point, that we must always remember unity and solidarity leading to teamwork. Kaya ba ninyo ito? Napakahina sagot ninyo. Hindi, sabay-sabay. Andali lang. Taas noo. Lahat tayo mga Pilipino. Teamwork. Kaya ba? Kaya ba natin ito? Kaya ba natin ito? The best is coming. And in many areas, the best has already happened.
Kaya huwag niyong kalimutan ang ating singulo na kaya natin ito ay yung thumbs up. Thumbs up! Thumbs up! Kaya ba natin ito? We can do it! You know, I am not used to public speaking. I was ready, in fact, to sing a song. Kahit na naman ang sakripisyo, kahit na naman ang kalamidad. Kung tayo nagkasama-sama, kung tayo nagkakaisa, kahit na naman ang kahirapan, kaya natin ito. Kaya natin ito.
Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay Philippines 2000.
Mabuhay ang Pilipinas.
Thank you very much.
And now we'd like to call the AFP band to render their final songs for President Fidel Valdez Ramos. Tapos na ba sila? Their second number is ready. Thank you to the AFP band. We would now like to call Mayor Rufy Biazon, the Vice Mayor Artemio Simudal, Councilor Attorney Raul Coro, Councilor Ivy Arciaga Tadeta, and Councilor Jedi Presnedi from the City Council of Muntinlupa, who would like to present the resolution. Mayor Rufy Biazon, please. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. The friends and family of the former president, the late President Fidel Ramos. In behalf of the people of Muntinlupa, I, together with our Vice Mayor Artemio Simondak, the presiding officer of the City Council, Councilors Ivy Tadefa and Jedi Presnedi, and our Majority Floor Leader, Councilor Raul Coro, we wish to convey to the friends and family of the late President our condolences and our grief for the loss of a Muntinlupeño. As you may know, President Ramos was a resident of Muntinlupa for a long time. And although he hails from Pangasinan, just like my father, we consider him a son of Muntinlupa. And it was during his term that the Muntinlupa became a city. And we owe it all to him to make that happen, which really was the start of the progress of the city. So along with the entire citizenry of Muntinlupa and the Filipino people, we grieve the loss of the late president. Personally, of course, I also looked up to him as, just as I'm looking up to my father as a role model. Having grown up in a military camp, being a military brat, I've always had high respects for those who serve. And of course, seeing Fidel Ramos not just become the leader of the country's armed forces, but of the nation, I can't help but say that in my own public service, he has become somebody that I look up to and emulate. His legendary CSW really is something that all public officials should follow. And of course, we grieve the loss, but we celebrate the life of President Fidel Ramos, who has brought so much honor, dignity to the presidency, and brought us, the Filipinos, to greater heights in the international community. So we do hope that the memory that he leaves behind will especially be resounding to the next generation, the younger ones, those whom we say Generation Z, so that in the future, among the next generation, there will be another such leader full of patriotism and love for the country. So again, in behalf of the people of Muntinlupa, we give our respects to the late president and the city council. If I'm Vice Mayor, please. The city council has passed a resolution giving honor to the late president. Vice Mayor, please.
May I request the city councilors to stand here, please? A resolution number 2022-019. A resolution expressing heartfelt condolences to the family, the late 12th President of the Republic of the Philippines, His Excellency Fidel V. Ramos, who died on July 31. 2022. Sponsored by Honorable Councilor Atty. Raul Coro, Honorable Councilor Alexon Diaz, Honorable Councilor Paticati Bukayaw, Honorable Councilor Rachel Arciaga, Honorable Councilor Ivy Rhea Tadepa, Honorable Councilor Alan Ray Camilon, Honorable Councilor J.D. Presnedi, Honorable Councilor Ting Niepes, Honorable Councilor Mark Lester Baez, Honorable Councilor Francis T. Bagaching, Honorable Councilor Luby Constantino, Honorable Councilor Engineer Mamerto Sevilla Jr., Honorable Councilor Engineer Marisa Rongabilla, Honorable Councilor Engineer Arlene D. Hilapo, Honorable Councilor Cornelio Martinez, Honorable Councilor Rodolfo Moldes Jr., Honorable Councilor Walter Arcilla, Honorable Councilor Kenichi Tagaki Jr. Whereas, on July 31, 2022, the late 12th President of the Republic of the Philippines, His Excellency Fidel Valdez Ramos, died at the age of 94. Whereas, FBR, as he is fondly known and called, was not only a long-time resident of Muntinlupa City, but was also president who signed the bill into law, Republic Act 7928, otherwise known as the law that converted the then municipality Muntinlupa City, Muntinlupa, into a highly urbanized city to be known as the city of Muntinlupa. Whereas, he signed the Republic Act 7926 on March 1, 1995, in formal ceremonies at Malacanang Palace in the presence of Muntinlupa city government officials led by then Mayor Ignacio R. Bunyi. Whereas, FBR was also instrumental in the conversion of the 244 hectares Alabang Stock Farm into what is now known as the Philimbes Corporate City, a mixed commercial residential development that brought about further development and progress in the city of Muntinlupa. Whereas, it was also during his term as President of 1992 to 1998 that the Skyway from Makati to Alabang was built, thereby facilitating travel to and from Muntinlupa and increasing the values of real estate properties in the city. Whereas, the former president deserves to be recognized and commended for his invaluable contribution in making Muntinlupa one of the leading highly urbanized cities in the country today. Now, therefore, be it resolved, as it is hereby resolved by the 10th Sangguniang Panlungsod of Muntinlupa, to express heartfelt condolences to the family of the late 12th President of the Republic of the Philippines, His Excellency Fidel Valdez Ramos, who died on July 31, 2022. Adopted by the 10th Sangguniang Panlungsod of Muntinlupa this first day of August 2022 on its 5th regular session. Signed, all councilors, approved, attested by yours truly, Artemio Simundak, City Vice Mayor, Presiding Officer, approved, City Mayor Rosano Rupino B. Biason.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mayor. You may present it to Ms. Christy Ramos, will receive in behalf of the family. May we now call on Mr. Sam Ramos Jones to give his tribute to President Fidel V. Ramos and the family's response.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Ramos Jones. I'm the son of Angel Ramos and one of the 8 grandchildren of the late former President Fidel Valdez Ramos and our beloved Lola Ming Ramos. Before we get into it, I just wanted to express, on behalf of myself, our entire family, our gratitude to all of you that have joined us this past week in grieving the loss of our beloved Lolo Eddie, and also in celebrating and giving thanks for all his contributions to our lives. And while we're at it, if I might implore you to also give a round of applause to everyone that has helped us over the last week. The people at Heritage, the AFP, Office of the President, the Philippine National Police, and of course, our extended RPDev family and the army of volunteers that have been with us. Thank you. Sharing this stage with some of the speakers from this evening and throughout this week is very humbling and also somewhat daunting. Like Lolo, I'm not exactly a stranger to public speaking, but this is for sure the most nerve-wracking speech I've ever had to write and give. But Lolo is here watching, so I'll do my best to make him proud. Fidel V. Ramos was many things to many people: a son, a brother, a soldier, a scuba diver, a loving husband and father, a warrior in battle, and a golfing buddy, a problem solver and a peacemaker, an officer, a gentleman, a rebel, and a statesman, a loving grandfather. He was all those things and more to me. I had the great privilege of having him up close and personal, a role model, a living legend of history, a demanding boss, and a supportive, very goofy grandfather, all rolled into one. But he was also just a man, and I don't say that to diminish his life or its many achievements. On the contrary, it's to serve as a reminder that anybody, all of us, might be capable of aspiring to such great heights. He was the best of us and showed us all what this country and its people might achieve. All Filipinos can learn something from his life. He lived through almost a century of our nation's history as a witness and as a participant. Fidel V. Ramos was born on March 18, 1928 in Lingayen, Pangasinan, barely a generation removed from our War of Independence from Spain. His grandfather, Placido Ramos, would fight in that war as a Katipunan revolutionary. His father, Narciso Ramos, was a journalist, lawyer, and later legislator in what was then the Commonwealth of the Philippines. Lolo's mother, Angela Marcos Valdez of Ilocos Norte, was an educator and a very dedicated and loving mother. Manong Eddie had 2 younger sisters, Letty and Gloria. Their life was relatively comfortable and simple before the war, and Lolo was just 13 years old when it came. The Lingayen Gulf would be the site of both Japanese and then later American amphibious landings, and our family's ancestral home was burned to the ground. Lolo Nachong traded the trappings of an assemblyman for the rigors of a guerrilla intelligence officer. Meanwhile, a young Eddie Ramos risked life collecting and couriering secret communications. It was only his first experience with military intelligence, certainly not the last. They lost their property and possessions, some friends and even loved ones, but our family were among the fortunate. They had kept their lives and their courage, and they learned a valuable and humbling lesson, that sometimes you must start over at your beginnings. After the war, Narciso Ramos continued to serve the Philippines, this time by establishing our newly independent republic among the community of nations. He served as Minister Counselor in Washington, D.C., and as ambassador to Argentina, India, and Taiwan, and ultimately served as foreign minister. Lola Letty Ramos Shahani would more closely follow their father's path as an academic, a diplomat, and a senator. Nobody back then would have pegged Lolo as being destined for a soldier's life. He was considered too bookish and mild-mannered. In fact, he was really interested in pursuing an education as an engineer, to learn and apply a craft that might serve a devastated country in need of rebuilding. Ultimately, he did figure that there was probably not a better engineering education than one provided by the US military. And of course, the full-ride scholarship was an added attraction. FVR's application to West Point, though, hit an immediate snag. Before she passed, Lola Letty told me the story of how FVR had initially failed to meet the minimum physical requirements for West Point because his chest was too small. Shrugging this off as a mere temporary setback, FVR, with trademark Filipino ingenuity, some concrete slabs, steel piping, sweat, and determination, endeavored to build up his strength and his physique. And he would maintain that passion and commitment to physical fitness for the rest of his life, not just as a matter of a personal habit, but as an advocacy to inspire all Filipinos to live healthier and longer lives. Lolo last visited West Point in 2015. It was his 65th graduation anniversary, and I recall very vividly the astonishment and amusement on the faces of those young cadets, 70 years his junior, as he challenged them to a round of 20 push-ups and 20 sit-ups on the floor, which he completed. Upon graduating from West Point in 1950, FVR went on to earn a master's in civil engineering from the University of Illinois, and then returned to the Philippines to begin his long and storied military career. His numerous military achievements are known to history. For example, history books will recall that in 1952, a then Lieutenant Ramos, as infantry reconnaissance platoon leader in the 20th Battalion Combat Team of the Philippine Expeditionary Force to Korea, PEFTOC, served an instrumental role at the Battle of Hill Erie. What history books will not record is the fact that FVR would carry recurring nightmares of that war for the rest of his life. And here lies another crucial lesson. Soldiers that have seen war, true warriors, desire peace above all else. Little wonder then that later in his public service career, FVR sought out peace with former left and right-wing rebels and signed a landmark peace agreement with the Moro National Liberation Front, which paved the path for a lasting peace in Mindanao. As a soldier, Lolo also consistently led from the front. He developed that trait early in his career, and he would take it with him for the rest of his life. As a young officer, he established a reputation for competence and diligence, and eagerly taking on more than was expected of him. One military colleague recalled that Captain Ramos was already doing the work of a colonel. More impressive to me, though, is the fact that he established that sterling reputation purely on his own merits. Early in his career, most of his colleagues had no idea that his father was a prominent diplomat or that he had an even more famous Ilocano cousin. Lolo always ensured that he took on the same hardships as his men, and he believed strongly that a person's worth is determined not by their name or their bloodline, but by the content of their character and of their conduct. As a soldier and as the son of an eminent diplomat, FVR had the good fortune of traveling to many places, meeting and learning from people of all walks of life. This worldly perspective he would also maintain for the rest of his life. So while FVR was the ultimate Filipino patriot, he also saw himself as a citizen of the world. As a young man, he had seen war at home, in Korea, in Vietnam. As an older man, he sought peace, friendship, and partnership, both at home and across the globe. He believed that the Philippines has an important role to play in regional and global affairs. And if he were here, he would implore me to remind you that that has never been more true than it is today. For all his international travels, though, Lolo's prolific local travels during his military career may have been even more important. My mom speculates that FVR very well may have visited every single barangay in the Philippines at least once. Indeed, he would need to call on every single one of those many friends he had made across the country and across decades during those tense days in February 1986. The history of EDSA has sadly become a matter of the present culture war debate. In those politicized narratives, we often lose sight of simpler, unifying truths. That the EDSA revolution was bloodless in it of itself can be thought of as a miracle. that the AFP did not fracture, that this country was spared a potential civil war before, during, and after EDSA is one of FVR's greatest, most enduring, and perhaps underappreciated legacies. Underpinning Lolo's actions at EDSA were his convictions as a Democrat and a Christian. Ultimately, regardless of chains of command or hierarchies or blood ties, his faith taught him that in times of moral crisis, a man must be answerable to God and his conscience alone. FVR heard and answered his call to duty, honor, and country. And in that moment, where he chose to risk his life, his fortune, and his sacred honor on an uncertain outcome, he also made a pact, a covenant with God. The man nicknamed Tobacco negotiated with his creator that if their revolution would succeed and Lolo might survive, he would give up his smoking habit. When you make a covenant with God, you must keep it. Though ever the shrewd negotiator, Lolo seemed to have found a contractual loophole in chewing his cigars ever after. Lolo's faith would also manifest in his tireless work ethic, which he insisted on inculcating in all of those who worked with him. The phrase Protestant work ethic comes to mind, but as you've all heard, another motto more strongly comes to mind in the hearts and minds of those who worked with FVR, CSW, complete staff work. The ethics of CSW served not just Lolo in his own career, but certainly served the nation as he governed it. Having ascended to the highest office in the land, Lolo became the first Filipino officer in history to hold every rank in the armed forces from second lieutenant all the way up to commander-in-chief. And having reached the apex of his career, he never took it easy. As with his military record, his achievements as president are well known to history. But those many achievements were simply the outcome of what I believe is the more important story of how he governed. Once again, he led from the front, but he governed from the center. For all his own brilliance, FVR's greatest achievements could not have been accomplished alone. All throughout his life, he appreciated the necessity and the power of teamwork. He worked with all sectors of society and reached out across political divides to form a rainbow coalition. He would work with anyone and everyone so long as they were interested in getting down to work too. He also listened because he knew that no one person has all the answers. His approach to governance was through consultation and frank discussion. He was open to criticism and did not take it personally. But he was also decisive in his decision-making, and crucially, he took full responsibility for the decisions he made. He showed us a model for representative democracy, good governance, and crucially, effective governance. Over the past week, our family has been awestruck and overwhelmed by the support and love that this nation has shown. It has been truly a humbling and privileged experience to see just how many people from all sectors, from all ends of the political spectrum, from all walks of life and all over the world, Lolo was able to touch. Before wrapping up, my mother Angel asked me to share a poem with you all. Good thing it is one of my favorite poems as well, and it happened to be one of Lolo's also. Mom and I think it perfectly sums up the kind of man Lolo was, the values he lived by, and the values he passed down to us. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up again with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except for the will which says, hold on. If you can walk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and all that's in it, and what's more, you'll be a man, my son. By his life, FVR has set the ultimate example. But for all of his astonishing achievements, let us remember, FVR was just a man, a person, a human being, as are we all. Mortal, yes, even flawed perhaps, and yet just as capable of the same heroic acts and almost boundless achievement. He was the best of us. But if I've learned one thing from him, above all else, it is that the best is in us all. It is up to us to realize our own potential, just as he did, just as he would want us to, just as we know he would be proud of us for doing. Looking back over FVR's past life, we might ask ourselves, if we each live as long and achieve even only half as much as FVR, what good might we do for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for this country? Imagine all the more what good we might do if we did it together. In his later years, FVR spoke often of and to the younger ones, the generation of Filipinos that would have to take up the mantle of leadership. He recognized that the world was changing, that there are new threats we must face to protect our environment, to maintain regional security, and to adapt to rapidly evolving technology. He recognized, too, that long-standing problems remain: malnutrition, poverty, ignorance, and corruption. This is the challenge. This is the opportunity that lays before us. To truly honor FVR's legacy, let us then be here dedicated to the unfinished task that remains, the great task of protecting and perfecting this republic. Now, a grateful nation thanks Fidel V. Ramos for his service. A loving family will grieve his absence, and we will all cherish what he has taught us. Now it is time for this old soldier's well-deserved rest. He fought the good fight. He has finished his work. But we have not. I saw that one eminent historian referred to FVR's passing as the passing of a generation. Let us instead think of it as the passing of the torch. Lolo, thank you for everything. We love you. We are so proud of you. And while we are in no means in a rush to get there, we very much look forward to seeing you again one day. Until then, boss.
This brings our program, our tribute, to an end. Thank you and good night.